Liberal Viewer presents.
So when Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius recently announced a federal regulation, now slightly modified, that exempts certain religious organizations, including churches, from a requirement under the 2010 healthcare reform law that employer health plans cover birth control as a preventive service, there was a lot of misinformation about the rule in the media, but nowhere more so than on Fox News, where Fox and Friends anchor Steve Doocy started a recent analysis of the issue with the misinformation you can see here.
Catholic leaders across this country up in arms over President Obama's healthcare mandate requiring all religious organizations to cover birth control for their employees.
Of course, the regulation did not require all religious employers to cover birth control for their employees, but actually specifically exempted every religious employer where the inculcation of religious values is the purpose of the organization primarily employs persons who share the religious tenets of the organization serves primarily persons who share the religious tenets of the organization, and the organization is a nonprofit. But, of course, none of that information made it into the Fox and Friends report, even though Steve Doocy brought on Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson Jr., who, instead of correcting the misinformation from Doocy, actually exacerbated it in this clip.
The White House has said, well, we'll work out the balance. Well, there is no balance, and I believe it's a stark constitutional violation, and it's going to be played out in the court.
But what that Fox News legal analyst failed to mention is that this issue has already played out in the courts multiple times, because 28 states already require employer health plans to cover birth control, with some using a religious exemption with the exact same wording as was in the federal regulation, including my state, California, where Catholic Charities already challenged the exact same wording in the 2004 case of Catholic Charities of Sacramento versus Superior Court, in which the mainly Republican-appointed judges on the California Supreme Court found by a 6-1 vote that requiring employer health plans to cover birth control, except those meeting the same religious employer exemption, doesn't violate the U.S. Constitution, and the U.S. Supreme Court refused a request to review that decision. So there's a lot of legal precedent in support of the constitutionality of this regulation that Fox News' legal analyst failed to mention. But the false propaganda from Fox News was not confined to legal analysis, also including bad medical information about the contraceptive drugs covered as preventive services, as you can see when supposedly straight news anchor Bill Hemmer falsely claimed abortion pills are covered when he interviewed a Christian rights lawyer challenging the rule in this clip.
Okay, now the issue is contraception, right? But it also goes to providing the abortion pill. And you have an issue with both of this, correct?
Well, yes. Actually, the mandate imposes on all employer health plans the requirement of paying for and providing not only contraception and sterilization, but some drugs that many believe are abortion-causing drugs. Plan B, the morning after pill, as well as Ella, which is known as the week after pill.
Now, the problem with the information from both the Fox News anchor and his guest there is that none of the pills mentioned and none of the contraceptives covered actually cause abortions, according to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, a group representing over 90% of American OBGYNs, including my wife, because all those birth control methods prevent pregnancy in one of the same three ways that ordinary birth control pills do: by preventing ovulation, by preventing normal movement of sperm and egg, and by preventing the implantation of a fertilized egg that begins a pregnancy. So arguing that any of those pills is an abortion pill would mean ordinary birth control pills are abortion pills, which is just not medically accurate. And the final big inaccuracy in the Fox News reporting on this issue was a little more subtle, but also very important, in the way Fox News emphasized that Catholic institutions would be forced to pay for contraception, as you can see from supposedly straight news anchor Megyn Kelly earlier this week in this clip.
Well, Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius writes an op-ed today in USA Today, trying to tamp down the firestorm over the Obama administration's new rule on contraceptives and Catholics and Catholic institutions having to pay for them.
Now, the problem with claiming Catholic institutions have to pay for contraceptives under this rule is that health plans that include coverage of contraceptives actually cost employers less than those that don't. As the White House website pointed out, the National Business Group on Health estimated it would cost employers 15 to 17% more not to provide contraceptive coverage than to provide it, after accounting for both the direct medical costs of potentially unintended and unhealthy pregnancies and indirect costs such as employee absences and reduced productivity. And if you check out the website of the National Business Group on Health, it's easy to see why, with birth control costing a few $100s a year to prevent the over $7,000 cost of a vaginal birth, the over $12,000 cost of a cesarean section birth, as well as many other expenses, meaning beyond the religious controversy, providing contraceptive coverage to women just makes good business sense and good economic sense for a nation trying to get its healthcare costs under control, which is why I agreed with the Obama administration's original rule that, except in the case of nonprofits with a religious purpose that employ and serve mainly people with the same religious beliefs, decisions about birth control should be left up to employees, not their bosses. But I want to know what you think. Should the law generally require employers to cover contraceptives and leave it up to the employees to decide whether to use them? And regarding the original rule on religious employers, do you think the Obama administration's original exception leaving out nonprofits with a religious purpose that employ and serve mainly people with the same religious beliefs was too broad, too narrow, or just right?
YouTube, you decide.